Hi, everybody. This is Janie, and we're getting ready to start our Facebook Live for today. Our topic is tips and tricks for starting to digitize with Point Create, and that sounds kind of dry, but what I actually have planned for today is to go through the tools in Point Create and Digitizing and show you the basics of how they work, and then some fun things that you can do with them. And I have some samples, stitch out samples here to show you as we go through our little presentation today as well. So Amy is in the background today, and she's waving at you and saying, hi, everybody. And we're going to work together so that I can show you software for a while and then come back and show you samples for a while. And we'll stop periodically so you guys can ask questions too. So you need to post your questions. Amy will read them and then she will feed them back to us as we go through. There may be some people sneak in that will post outside links on the feed trying to entice you to click to go to strange websites, and we don't want you to do that as well because we don't want anybody to get hacked or spammed. SVP is always going to do the Facebook Live free, and the only links that Amy might put something up there to another video or something like that, but they would be SVP links. So I think, Amy, we are ready to get started. So if you want to switch me over, thank you. And I've sat down and before I do a Facebook Live or any class, really, I sit down and work my way through techniques. It's kind of like a way of working out your ideas to see how you like the end result of what you do. And it's a good thing, I think, a good lesson for those of you who are working with software, and especially if you're a beginner or maybe you used to digitize, but you haven't used digitizing for a long time, to get a feel for these tools. So this was sort of the little sampler design that it's not really a design, but the little worksheet that I did when I was working through my ideas for today. And what I'm going to focus on are the different types of tools and the end result of what we can do with them. So I just kind of put this up here so you guys could see it and get a feeling for how much different texture and what different looks we can get with these different kinds of tools. So I'm going to cancel. I have it in live view right now. I'm going to cancel out my live view. And this is my design. You can see it. It's in the digitizing software window. Here's my film strip on the left-hand side. If you're not familiar with digitizing, you know that this film strip shows you a color change. It shows you a stitch object, and the stitch objects are named. So this one's a pattern fill. This one is an applique. If I scroll on down, because often things are hidden down towards the bottom, you'll see that I've also got a feathered satin, a single stitch, some Richelieu bars, that's what these guys over here are, and some tapered motifs. And I'm going to go through and rebuild this, showing you the tools, and then give you maybe some ideas for something new to try, or if you haven't really done much digitizing, some courage to get in there and play with those tools and make something fun today. So I'm going to go to the file and open a new window. Now, if you are a Mac user, I really can't show the Windows software and the Mac software at the same time. In July, we are going to be doing a whole workshop. Our software coordinator has put this all together of Facebook Lives, and we'll be doing a Windows one, and then a week or two later, we'll be doing the same class in the Mac side. So keep your eye open for those. But in the Mac side, when you open a new window, a new program window, that's what this is called, in mySewnet Digitizing, Windows always gives you an Express Design Wizard. In Mac, it does not open to the Express Design Wizard. So in Windows, I'm just going to cancel this out because I don't want to use Express Design. I want to use the Point Create tools, which are manually Digitizing. And then in Windows, we have a ribbon bar. In Mac, you're going to have a little toolbar that sits right here that has Quick Create, Freehand Create, and Point Create as little buttons. And once you get that under your belt, if you're working from the Mac side, pretty much all the instructions are the same. The tools are all there. They're just in a little bit different places. So I kind of wanted to throw that out because I know we have a lot of Mac users that have joined us. So I have opened my new digitizing window, and I'm going to make just a large hoop size so that I have plenty of space to show you all different kinds of types of stitches. And I'm going to turn this rotated so it's horizontal. So this is my 360 by 260. It's in a universal setting, but we have that for both top of the line and mid upper line machines on both brands. And then I want to talk about what kind of tools we have. So we have a Quick Create tab, and we used that in a previous Facebook Live where I drew this little cartoony man in Draw and Paint, and then we use Quick Create Express Design to go through and make our stitches. Quick Create tools are point and click, and they require background art, and they work better with really good art. Freehand Create and Point Create are actually both manual digitizing tools, but Freehand Create requires that you click and hold the mouse button, or if you're using a tablet and pen, you draw with the pen to create an object of stitches, and you cannot release the mouse or raise the pen from the tablet until the object is complete. I, frankly, never use Freehand Create because my hands are not that steady, and I am not an artist who does lots of manual drawing, but that's what the Freehand Create tab was designed for. Point Create also allows you to specify objects, but in Point Create, you use points. You just click your points to make the shape. And when you have clicked the points, you finish the tool, release the tool, and it makes the stitches for you. So both of these are user-defined areas of stitches as opposed to Quick Create, which relies on an image. But Point Create is going to be the one that allows you to have the most precision initially. And it also places fewer points around the outside than the Freehand Create does. When you use Freehand Create, it puts lots and lots and lots of points around a shape, and then you have to spend a lot of time editing. Whereas using Point Create and defining the points yourself up front is more efficient in the long run, easier to edit after the fact, after you make these things. So why would you want to use Point Create versus using Quick Create or the Express Design Wizard? And my answer to that is I use Express Design Wizard if I have really great, simple clip art to get me started. And then I go to my digitizing window and I edit. But if I have something where I need complete control, for example, digitizing a logo or digitizing a pet or creating a bouquet of flowers where I want to make petals and have lips and things, Point Create is going to give me the opportunity to control where I put the pieces parts and edit them much more easily. So Point Create is really a great tool. People who are afraid of digitizing, 9 times out of 10, it's simply because nobody has ever taught you, where do I start? How do I pick the tool? How do I adjust it once I get it on the screen? And this class today is to try to help you take a step forward into experimenting with using the digitizing software. Okay, so having given you that little bit of background, we're going to look at these toolbars in Point Create section by section. And in the Point Create tab, and if you're working on Mac and you're following along, it's the little control buttons that have the 3 different ways to digitize stitches, and it's the one on the right-hand side for Point Create. So you should have a command toolbar, and we're going to talk about that kind of at the end. You should have a fill area and line toolbar, an enhance toolbar, a column toolbar, and some options. You also have a film strip at the left, a design panel at the right. And in this design panel at the right, it'll tell you some information about what you've already created. And it will also give you the thread colors in a form that you can change. So this thread color over here is the initial thread color. And I can right click on that and go to Properties and select a new thread. But I can also just quickly come over to the design panel and double click and select from those thread databases. So that is my preferred tool of choice. I think it's good to know all the different ways that you can use these tools and then pick what works the best for you. So I just changed my first thread color by using the design panel and double clicking on it. Now, fill area and line are what we're going to look at first. The tools look a bit different in Mac. And in the Mac software, you won't see them laid out quite the same way. The toolbars look a little bit different, but if you hunt around, you should be able to find them. We should have a setting for pattern fill. It's on by default, and I can tell that because it has a highlight around it. And if I click the bottom of that button, it allows me to choose to have no fill, or to have pattern fill, or one of the other specialty stitch types. And we have quite a few different specialty stitches. If you click the top half of the button, it goes off. So you'll be making an area of stitches with an outline. We call this a border. And again, it has many different styles of stitches you can pick from. Satin line is the default, but you will not have fill stitches in it. If you click pattern fill again, you will have fill stitches and an outline. If you click the top of the satin line or the line stitch, it goes off and you're just going to make fill. Everything in here can be toggled on and off by a click. But if I have satin line off and I click the top of pattern fill to turn it off too, the software says, you can't do that. You have to either make a satin line or a line, or you have to make a pattern fill, or you have to make both. So that's how those two tools work. And I know for beginners, that's one of the things that confounds people often. It's really pretty straightforward once you understand it. The third option here in fill area and line is Applique. And we'll talk a little bit about Applique. I think Mickey has done a Facebook Live on Applique, and I think there's some other resources out there as well, but I'll talk about it a little bit in passing. If you want to make something Applique initially, you can click that on as well. When you click the bottom part of it and choose Select Applique Fabric, that is when it opens up a window so that you can preset fabric parameters. And I'm going to talk about those after I've made some satin areas and show you how you can alter things up and change it from a pattern fill with a border, a pattern fill without a border with applique, because once you've made an object, no matter what that object is, in the digitizing window, you can go back and change it up and make it whatever works for you. So once I've set up what I want to make, and I'm just going to make this initially a pattern fill with a border. I'm going to use a create area or line tool. I'm just going to come in here and kind of randomly make a little funky shape, kind of almost like a star, but not quite. And then when you right click, you get that little satin border around the fill. But here's one of the things that this is a great tip for you. By default, when you make a pattern fill, if you do not come into fill area and line and preset the settings, by default, it makes the fill area closed because the fill area has to be closed. It can't be anything else. But this satin line around the outside is open. And that's when you'll see that you get a spot here where the satin line doesn't go all the way around the outside. So all you have to do is right click to release the tool. So you go into point edit mode, right click again to open that fill area and properties. And when you go to the line tab, look at this. There's an option here for closed border line. It is not on by default. So once I click that, and in Windows, you can actually click apply to see this change live. See how when I clicked apply, it closed that border line and made it go all the way around my little shape. So little tips like this, things you learn as you go, things you learn as you take classes from other people. This is what makes it easier and easier to digitize your own things. Yes, I have been digitizing since about 1992. I've done lots and lots of workshops, but all knowledge is learned a step at a time. And the more you play with this, the more you will learn as you go through these. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK here. And I didn't make this quite as big as I wanted. So I'm going to come down to the bottom and choose Box Select. That gives me a box. I'm going to hold the Control and Shift keyboard keys. I think on Mac it is Alt and Shift or Command and Shift. You'll have to experiment. But that keeps it locked proportionally and centered. So I can make this the size I want it to be to play with just for our class. And then I'm going to deselect it and right click to release the box select. And when I select this again, and I can select it here or in the film strip, this is square because that line was initially open for the border. So I'm just going to shift and click and then click on it and make it round. So now I have a nice little squiggly curvy shape. And remember, we're just doing this for fun. It's not rocket science. We're not making a real design, but learning how to use these tools is very, very helpful to you as you move forward and want to start digitizing your own things. So I've just box selected this again, and I'm adjusting the shape a little bit. And I want to actually have 4 of these shapes that are all alike so I can show you some of the different stitch types. So to do that, fastest, easiest way is to duplicate them. So I'm going to come over the film strip from my pattern fill and make sure it's highlighted with a click. Right click and tell it to duplicate. And then I can drag this so it's beside the first one. I'm going to come back up here to this one, right click, duplicate, and drag it down here. And it really doesn't matter. They're all duplicates. So I could select the new duplicate, right click, and duplicate. And now I have 4 little stitch objects that I can come in here and play with and adjust and show you how some of the editing takes place. So Amy, do we have any comments or questions up to this point?
Hi, Janie. I don't see any questions just yet. I think you're good to keep going here. Yeah.
Okay, super. So a lot of times over the years, I've learned so many things from other people, and I've had many, many mentors. Every time I attend a class and every time I teach a class, I learn something new. So it's really kind of fun. Some of these techniques are actually ideas that I've gleaned from other people. I think it's always interesting to see that we all think differently, even though we all think the same. So that makes it kind of fun. So this first one, I'm going to click on the first one I made, and then I'm going to right click, and I can either right click over the highlighted film strip, or I can right click over the selected object in the work area. I have to right click twice. I have to inbox select. And that's when it opens up that fill area and line. Now, what I wanted to show you here is within fill area and line, because this has a fill and Align. There's a tab for the fill options. There's a tab for the line options. And there's a tab for Applique, because Applique is a possibility even though we have it turned off in this design. So I'm going to go to the fill options and I'm going to open this up and I'm going to scroll through some of these amazing pattern fills that we have already in the software. And you can also create your own pattern fills using the Draw and Paint software that comes with the Platinum. So this Digitizing is in Platinum. I forgot to mention that. You can actually create your own, and they end up shown under My Motifs. And I think I've reinstalled this and I don't have any My Motifs in here right now. But it's kind of fun to play around with some of these different pattern fills and just see how they look. You can change the angle of the pattern fill. You can adjust how dense it is, and you can set the underlay and the compensation. Underlay is supporting stitches that go down first, and compensation is if you've ever stitched an embroidery design, and when you stitched out, maybe your embroidery design had 3 or 4 sections of fill that make up the body of an animal. And if you just saw something blink, I think the system blinks, so don't worry about it. So if those areas sit next to each other and you stitch them out and the stitches are going across this way and they get a little gap in between, you can increase the compensation setting and it will push the stitches out to compensate for the fact that they're going to shrink in. And that's what compensation is. So all of these tools are here because you digitize things yourself. If you're digitizing a fill where areas overlap, you might want to start with a compensation of 5 or 10 and then do your test stitch. And if you need more compensation because they're still pulling apart a little as that fabric just kind of shrinks in a bit with the stitches, increase the compensation a little bit more. As you do more digitizing, you're going to find that you get a sense of when you need to compensate and when you don't, or when you need more underlay and when you don't. And those are all things that practice makes perfect. So I can also remove the border. So I can make this with no border line. I just clicked apply to take that away. Or I can make it with several different styles of border line. You can make a motif line border with the different stitches. My motifs are the ones that you've designed personally yourself. This one just has the default My Motif. Universal stitches, Viking stitches, and floss stitches. And all of these stitches can be incorporated into your embroidery designs. That one probably will not work well for this, so we'll try, let's try this one. So now you can see I've got those little half circle kind of wheel shaped stitches around the outside of my border. Now on the line, I do have a closed border line now. I can also make the fill and the border 2 different colors by clicking Insert Color Change and then picking a new color. So you can create embroideries that are very, very rich, very, very textured. It's just how much time you want to devote to practicing and learning these skills. And I'm hoping to get you excited today to get you jump started so that you can play with this more. So I'm going to go to the film strip because this is an easy place to select things. And I'm going to select the next object in line. And I'm going to change this one to a motif fill. So up at the top of the fill area in line, when you right click and open that dialog box, pattern fill is there, but just like it is up here, it has that arrow on the bottom or arrow attached to it, and you can choose different types of fills. So I'm going to make a multi-wave fill out of this one. And I'm going to make the multi-wave fill density about 30, just experimenting to see if I like that, and that looks good. As you increase or decrease this density setting, it is going to increase or decrease the spacing between the wavy lines. So now I have a multi-wave line fill. And then I'm going to take this third one. I'm just going to leave it plain, just like it was. And then I'm going to take this fourth one, and applique is probably, out of all the years I've done this, number one question, number one thing that people want to learn is digitizing logos, because everybody's got an uncle, aunt, cousin, grandma, friend who has a company who needs a logo. The second most common question I've ever had is, how do I make an applique? How do I turn something into an applique? And our system has wonderful automatic applique tools. So I'm going to select this one, right click either over the selected object here or over the selected film strip here, doesn't matter, and choose properties, because I only want to change this one. Global properties, these two are the same. It would change both of them at the same time. So I want to do just the selected one. I'm going to use properties, and I'm going to go to pattern fill and make it no fill, because I don't want any fill texture over or under my applique. And I am going to go then to the applique tab, and I'm going to tell it I either want a standard applique, which is the old-fashioned way we used to do it, where it makes a marker stitch for us to place fabric. It tacks it down and stops so we can trim the fabric. It tacks the trimmed fabric down again, and then it does the finishing stitch around the outside. The other one that is very commonly used is the pre-placed piece. I defy you to say that 6 times in a row. And that is pre-cut piece. And that is the one we use with our digital cutters. So if you have a Memento or some other digital cutter, you're going to use pre-cut piece. And that is going to actually let you export a cut file for the cutter so that you can bring it in and die cut the applique fabric. Now, another thing that we pay attention to on applique is this margin. So when we do an applique, where do we want the cut edge of the fabric to be? Do we want it to be close to the inner edge of the stitches? Do we want it to be close to the outer edge of the stitches? Do we want it right smack in the middle? And that's going to vary depending on what type of applique that you do. I'm going to make sure that my applique line or satin stitch width is 4 millimeters, because that's what I want to use. And then in the applique, I'm going to use slightly less than half of that to push the cut fabric out towards the outer edge. So right now it's cutting the fabric at 0, which is the midline between the inner and the outer edge of the satin stitch. If I increase this to a 1.5 or a 1.7, and I'll click apply, it's going to make the fabric cut further out towards this edge. You can't see it because my satin stitches are kind of dense. The other thing I'm going to do is tell it to match the placement line. So it's going to, when it does the placement line for laying down the fabric, stitch that placement line where the cut edge of the fabric could be. If you check match placement line off, it is not, it's going to step it in to the center, and then you have to kind of guess if you have your fabric centered or not. So that's just sort of a brief overview of what those tools do. Now I'm going to go ahead and select a fabric, and we have a lot of fabrics in the database. We can choose quick colors, or we can go to the fabrics. With the fabrics, you can add your own, so you can scan a fabric and add it in as a new background. I'm going to use previously saved fabrics and just pick one that looks interesting. I think I did the polka dots for my sample. Oh no, I used a wild crazy one for my sample, but I'll use polka dots here. And once I click OK, and OK again. Now you're going to see this is my applique piece, and I'm just going to zoom in some for you so you can see it a little closer and see how cool that is. So now I have this neat little applique, and I can actually see it with the fabric that I want to use. Now there's a bunch of whole other tools that we can use. These are the points that define the boundary or where the stitches get placed. So for fill area and lines, they're a boundary for a fill area is a shape, it's closed. A boundary for a line can be open or closed. And these start building on your skills as you learn how to use the software. But I was going to tell you something else and I lost my train of thought. So it'll come back later. So now let's go move over and look at these enhancing tools. We have an enhancing tool that is to make a hole. So I'm going to open up, or I'm going to select this pattern fill, and I'll just zoom in so you can see that one a little bit closer, and right click to end my zoom tool. And when I select hole and I have an area of fill stitches, I can then click over that to define an area to, let's do something fun here. Let's make a little wonky heart. Now, while you are designing, you can cursor over those points and you can click and drag them, or you can shift and click and make a round point square. So I'm just going to make a little heart-shaped hole in the middle of my little wonky shape here. And when I right click to finish this and right click again to release the tool, I've literally now cut a hole in that fabric. Now, if we have time toward the end of our hour, I will come back and show you how you can take this and break these pieces apart. Once we do that, break apart is permanent. But once we do that, you can have a hole that does not have any border around it. So the flexibility that we have and the tools and so many things we can do, it always amazes me. Okay, so the next tool we have in Enhance is Emboss Line. And this is one that probably doesn't get used very much. It's similar to using embossing in Stitch Editor, but if I select an area, so I'm going to select this pattern fill here that I left just plain. Another tool that I love is this origin command, and it moves where the stitches start and stop, but you can visually rotate the angle of the stitches by dragging the little handle, and you can probably see that even better over here on this one. Here's the origin command. I can fussy cut where I want those little monkey faces in the pattern fill to be, or I can turn the monkeys upside down by rotating them. And I think these are things a lot of times beginners don't know. And because we can't write a single lesson that covers everything there is to learn, sometimes newer people just don't know that it is possible to do all these wonderful things. Okay, so I'm going to skip back over here to this guy and click to make sure he's selected, or select him in the film strip. And then what I want to do with this one is show you this emboss line. So I'm going to select emboss line, and I'm going to make some little lines, and a click makes a curve, a round point makes a curve. And then I'm going to right click to release the tool, and I'm going to, or to set the embossing line actually. And I right click, the tool is still on, and I can tell that because you can see the little point there. And then I'm going to make a nose, and I'm going to kind of shape this around into a nose and right click to make it emboss. And then we're going to do a big, silly, wavy grin. And all this does is changes the stitch points in that pattern fill so that it leaves a line that is literally embossed into the stitches. It's another way you can add texture to your embroidery designs. When you're done embossing, the right click once, set the emboss that you just made. The tool is still on, so you have to right click a second time. In Mac, it'll pop up with a menu, and you can either end the object or end the tool. Same thing, just a little different way to do it. Now, the next tool that we have in these enhancing tools is multi-wave line, and this is one we've had for a while. I remember how excited we were when this was added to the software. So when I select the multi-wave line, I have to have the multi-wave fill selected, and I'm just going to come over here and put some control lines, just a couple, and whoops. And I'm going to make another one, and I'm going to make this one at a really different angle. And now I'm going to right click to end that tool. And here you see my two control lines. There are some rules and guidelines for control lines. One of them is they should not crisscross each other, because many times when they do crisscross each other like this, you can get very dense areas, you can get pockets with no stitches, but you can work outside the rules a little bit sometimes and create some fun effects. So I'm just going to start kind of dragging these around, and do you see how this reshapes things? It's really kind of cool, kind of fun to do. So that's what the Enhance Multi-Wave Line tool can do. Now, I did have a question not too long ago. Somebody, a friend actually got in touch with me and said, we were talking about making holes, and she wanted to put holes in something. And we discussed whether there was a one-click hole feature. In Quick Create, if I have a picture in the background and I make a pattern fill by selecting pattern fill and clicking on a piece of the picture, and it makes the stitches for me, I then have quick stitch hole. But that requires that I'm working over a background image. So when you're in Point Create, there is no one click hole making feature. You're always going to have to lay the points down to define where you want that hole to be. Okay. So, any questions or comments yet, Amy?
Yes, actually, I think you just answered one of them, because somebody wanted to know if there were any default shapes for the whole feature on there. So I think you just answered that one. Somebody wants to know, and I'm going to read her question just straight up here. She said, trending in many appliques is a triple stitch in the center of the satin stitch.
Yes.
Can you, if you have time, can you show how to do that technique?
Yes. I'm going to go through the column tools, what's in the options, and these tools, and then I will go back. Remind me, Amy, make a note, and I will go back and show you. And actually, I have some samples, so I'll try and leave enough time to share these samples with you. It's pretty easy to do, but it does require break apart that I mentioned earlier. So let me go ahead here, and I want to talk about the column tools. The fill, area, and line tools work with a fill, some sort of a fill. It can be a pattern fill, it can be a motif fill, it can be a spiral fill, but it's going to be some sort of a fill in a closed area, and or a line. They are different than columns. The satin line tools, or the line tools, especially the satin column tool, the satin line tool, sorry, it's not a column tool, it's a line tool. The satin line tool, you place a line of stitches and tell it the width, and it calculates the stitches from the center of the line. The column tools are designed to work in pairs of points. So you're going to click 2 points that define a pair, and it will make a satin column. When would you use one, and when would you use the other? And I'm sure, you know, there are exceptions to this rule. Other people have different ways of doing things, but the things that I have discovered that I use, I want a satin line if I'm making an applique piece, and I might want to make this applique small, or I might want to make it large. I know that I'm going to have to right click and change the width of the satin stitches if I make it really small, or change the width wider if I make it really large. A satin line is always going to stay preset at the width that you tell it to be. A column stitch is a horse of a different color. So as we make it bigger or smaller, the column stitch scales with the rest of the design. So it takes more work to lay it down, more work to manipulate it. But if you have something where you want like a bow on an animal that you're digitizing, and you want that, you want to stitch it on the back of a jacket, or you want to stitch it really small, the satin column is going to scale itself larger or smaller accordingly as you scale the rest of the design. And that would be scaling it in digitizing. We're not talking about scaling in embroidery, which is a whole different thing. So we have first in these satin column tools a satin area. And a satin area simply lets you create an area of stitches. And you can make it in any shape. And when you right click and set those stitches, you can see these are satin stitches. If I go into live view and show this, oh, I'm outside my hoop. Which one of me, it must be that one I just made, is outside the hoop. Or I have something sneaky sitting outside the hoop. That's one of the things I love. It's this one because I put a motif stitch around it. Do you guys see that? It's outside the hoop boundary because that motif stitch was too large. So if I go to live view and I zoom up and I move my view, you can see these literally are satin stitches. Where would this be nice? Well, let's say if I wanted to make an element of a little circle of satin stitches, and I didn't want it to be pattern fill, I wanted it to be satin stitches. This is a great tool for making something like that. It's also a great tool for making fringe stitches. You can make fringe from satin line, but you can also make fringe with the satin area. All you have to do is come back with a running stitch and cover up the edge of those satin stitches in this satin area, and you can make really large areas of fringe or fluff for animals and fur. So what I want to do is select this and show you when you have a satin area, you have these control handles, and as you move around this area, you can control the angles of the stitches, and you can add control handles, you can remove control handles. I'm not going to go into a lot of depth with this, but see how those stitches are fanning around? I'm going to open this up and adjust the density to a higher number so the stitches are further apart so you can see actually how those stitches lay in there. So this is a really cool stitch type. It's not used very often. I think just because we forget it's there. So play with it, experiment with it, have a little bit of fun. Now, satin column, this is an area. So we defined it by points around the outside of the area. This is a column, and it is put down in points of 0.1, 0.2. If you start on the left and go to the right, you need to keep starting on the left and going to the right. Because if you forget and go to the right and then the left, do you see how that made a twist? So it actually twists the satin column when you go left, right, left, right, left, right, right, left, right, left, right, left. But you can use that to your advantage to do some fun things again. So I'm just going to make this one little piece of column. You can see that these points, they are in pairs, they're joined. You can make it fatter or skinnier. You can shape it. You can do some really cool things with satin column that you cannot do with a satin line, because a satin line, while you can curve it, you can't make it thick and thin because it's preset at a certain width. Do you start to get the feeling for why we have those two different tools in there? Then we have another type of satin column that is feathered. And the feathered satin column is again worked in points. You can make these square by holding shift click as well if you don't want them to be smooth, if you want them to be more angled. And a satin column, then when you right click and release that tool, you can see that that satin column has, by default, is feathered on both sides. If I right click on this, I can feather just side A. If I right click, I can feather just side B. And if I right click, I can break up the stitch length. So right now I've made these wide, and it's letting me make long satin stitches back and forth here, but I might only want my stitches to be 2 or 3 millimeters. So I can just change that stitch setting. And do you see how it broke those up? So it's a really great way for making fringe, for making feathers, to add textural interest to things. Then we have Richelieu bars, and Richelieu bars are another column tool. We can click in pairs again, but Richelieu bars are going to do an heirloom technique, and it's going to create rows of bars. And we have settings for those as well. So I'm going to right click over this finished piece, and you can set the width. So I can make them wider. See how they got thicker? Or I can make them skinnier. Now they get thinner. I can set the density of the bars. So it adjusted how many stitches are in that density. How dense the stitches are in each bar, sorry. And also you can either set by the gap size, how much space there is from one Richelieu bar to the next, or the total number of bars that you want to make in that section. And if you choose total number of bars, you can include additional first and last bar or not. So here, if I was filling a gap in some fabric, bridging up with Richelieu bars, I might not want a bar at the beginning and the end. I can turn that off. I guess you can do it for both. So minimum gap size or number of bars. Also, you have choices of underlay. So if you've ever done any Richelieu work, digitizing it used to be a nightmare because it took hours and hours and hours to digitize something with Richelieu bars in it. Now it's just a tool like everything else that works very quickly and easily. And then tapered motifs. And this is another one. Again, I think we don't use it as often as we could. A lot of people use it on the sewing and embroidery machines because we can do taper stitches there. But look how easy this is. I'm just going to go my left, right, and I'm going to make some of these thick and some of these thin and a couple of squared off ones just for fun. And I'll right click, and now you can see the default motif stitch here. Where the column was thin, the motifs are smaller. Where it was thicker, they're bigger. And you can play with this and create all kinds of interesting textural looks using those motif stitches. So I'm going to right click to release that tool and right click again to end it. And now you can see, once again, you have all these different wonderful stitches that you can go in here and play with. Let's see if we have anything in probably the crafting. I don't always preset stitches and stuff when I'm doing demos, so we'll just play with this and see how the different stitches look. But see how I can make my leaves larger or smaller, just depending on which stitch I choose. Now you will find some stitches lend themselves to some different techniques better than others. This stitch is too big for the space I had. So let's go back up here and choose embellishment stitches. This one should be interesting. So I have fun playing with those. And if you've never taken the time to dip into the column tools or play with those, do have a little fun with them. Now, I did this section of feathered satin. I'm going to select this and I'm going to come back and make another section of feathered satin just quickly because I want to show you another tool that has been very useful to me. So I now have 2 sections of feathered satin and I want this to be side B. And I'm going to break this up to 2 millimeters so they look like each other. And I can bump them up against each other. So I can box select that and I can move it. And I can bump them up against each other. But when I go to embroider this out, it will embroider this section and then it will stop. It will cut. It will tie, it will cut, it will jump, even though it might only be a 32nd of an inch. It will do another tie and then start stitching. So on the back of my fabric between these 2 segments, I am going to have thread tips and it's going to slow down my embroidery. So one of the cool things we can do is we can use these command tools and the single stitch. And if I select, and I'm going to zoom in here, and sometimes I have to fiddle with these a little bit, but if I select the first one of these feathered satins and I look at it here in the film strip, it's green at the top and red at the bottom. So green is where it starts, red is where it ends. If I look at this one, it's green at the top, it's red at the bottom. I can join red to green with a single stitch and it will make it seamless. So what I need to know is if I select single stitch while this is selected, it has already joined itself to the selected object. It's put the first point in. I can cursor over this point in the next object or it's not going to let me play right. So I didn't quite get them connected. If I had gotten them, oh, I did. Look at that, spot on. And Amy's going, what is she talking about? I have these little lines between each one of these objects, and that line is my indicator that it's going to stop. It's going to tie off, jump, tie on, and cut and make that tie on the back side. I just joined this feathered satin, this single stitch, and this feathered satin, and I know they're joined and seamless. They will not stop and tie off and cut and leave tails on the back because there's no black line in between those frames. So use those single stitches as a working tool when you're going through an embroidery and some pieces are all in the same color change and they could be joined to each other, but they're not. You can join them with a single stitch. Okay. So, and then there's also in this tool bar, there is an alignment stitch, and that's pretty straightforward. The alignment stitch, you just mark the place where you want to align 2 hoopings, and you put the alignment stitches in. And when you save it, it's going to go to the corners and stitch those out. And you can use that when you go to the next hooping of, say, an endless type design that you're building yourself. And then there's stop commands. And stop commands we use in Appliques. So going back to this Applique, I'm going to come down here to this one. Oops, I have alignment stitch still on. And this is where undo is your friend because I wanted to undo that alignment stitch. So I'm going to come back down here to this applique that we made. And we had the question, and I will cover this since this question was asked. We had the question of if I have made an applique like this, and there are softwares out there that have what they call an automatic, I can't think what the tool is called, but they automatically lay another stitch on top of the satin line to give it definition or to make it stronger. We can do that. It just takes a few more steps. So this is where we can use break apart to our advantage. So I'm going to select this satin line applique, and I believe the edit screen, the edit tab, sorry, we have a break apart tool. In Mac, I think it's in one of the toolbars. It's a hidden command. And once you break this apart, you're going to see that instead of an applique, this has literally been broken down into the pieces parts. And we have a running stitch. We have the stop command where it stopped for you to put the fabric. We have the applique piece fabric. We have the double stitch and the satin line. At the end of this satin line, we want to put a running stitch or a decorative stitch or something. What I do is select that satin line, right click over it and copy it, right click over and paste it. And this seems so simple after you see someone do it. That satin line now, I have my original and I have another one on top of it. All I have to do is right click it and open just that line's properties, change this to a double stitch or a double zigzag, and voila. Do you see how I now have a decorative line of stitches? Or you could use a motif line stitch and then pick your motif. This one probably would not be the prettiest motif to use because it's very large, but maybe in the utility stitches, we might have something like this. And that one's offset. So that one's not going to work. You have to play with them and find the stitches that are kind of centered instead of flipping to the inside or flipping to the outside. And it might be actually this one if we just mirror it. Nope. And yep, this one, the way this one is calculated is from the center out. You need to find a stitch that is centered over the center line. So, and there's lots of them in there that do that. Maybe some of the quilting stitches would work. Those are really big. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time doing this, and you can also adjust the size of the stitch. So this one was too large. We're going to take the height down to 4 millimeters because that's how wide my satin stitch is. And click apply, and lo and behold, I now have a nice little feathered stitch over the top. So Amy, let's go over to the camera. I want to quickly show some of these samples just to give people some ideas. Okay, so here is just a basic, and poor Amy, she's trying to explain to me how to get my things to show in the camera, and I'm doing it backwards every time. This was just a basic embroidery, but I took it and changed the pattern fills, and I changed the texture of the pattern fill and turned it from just a very plain, this was actually just an express design, very plain embroidery into something with lots of pizzazz. This is an example of an applique. And it's applique is done, I don't think I'll ever get good at that. Applique is done with a, see how it's got a motif stitch? It's got a candle wicking stitch around the outside edge. These are all things done with our digitizing software. This one is actually a sample that shows you each one of those different specialty stitches. So there's Richelieu bars in there, there's spiral fills, there's motif fills. Very cool stuff we can do. This one uses, and I never even got to this, but this one uses gradient fill. And this is actually from a software launch a long, long time ago, but it's a great sample to show you the things you can do with digitizing. I think Sonny Grint was the one who made up the demo for this. Pretty cool stuff. And with those gradient fills, you can color blend and give that texture of water. This is one that I had great fun with. They introduced a tapering capability into the digitizing software. And I don't know if you can see it, but like on where the legs come up into his body, where the stripes hang down above him, those are tapered on the ends. So when you use just satin line, you can taper the ends and you can taper them at different angles. And look what a professional finish that gives to the look. So just fun. This one is a little wall hanger, and it's done on a sheer fabric, but it's all just done in digitizing. And that background is several areas, if you can see it very well or not, several areas of different motif stitch fills. And then the little fish has pattern fills. This one uses some of the decorative stitches. So, and I just added a motif line in a circle, and then the center has a little motif pattern fill, a closed fill. Isn't that fun? It makes the top of a dandelion so it looks like dandelion fluff. And of course, I love lace. As you can tell, I'm wearing lace today with ribbon trim on it. This is a little embossed piece of lace, and this was all done in our software. So you do a pattern fill, you turn it to a crosshatch, you make it a pretty tight spacing, and then I just embossed the shape of a little cat on top by adding another layer of pattern fill in a different lace texture. And this is a little butterfly. It's all freestanding lace. If you look at it, same on the front as it is on the back, upside down. And see how that is using a lace base, and then I put pattern fills and decorative motif fills over the top. Wouldn't that be fun in a child's bedroom? And this is a perfect example of trial and error, because in this one, I did not have enough density in my lace base, and this little thing is floppy, floppy, floppy. So that's how you learn. You get in there and you play with these. Here's another piece of lace. Yes, I am a lace girl. Not everybody loves lace, but I do. This is kind of transparent, and it was done a technique where I did the applique as a whole, and then I came back and put the lace base over it, and then I did a motif stitch over that, and then I used a break apart, and I put the satin border around the outside. So very, very easy once you know how to do it. Here's my Richelieu bars. Isn't that fun? So the Richelieu bars around the edge, candle wicking stitches, and then a little bit of lace in the center. Now you remember I showed you when we did that software how you can take those satin columns and twist them. This was a class that I did. And each one of these is designed with satin areas or satin motif line areas or satin columns. And then you make them so they're not very dense. You open the density number up way high, and then you twist those columns, and it creates, I'm going the wrong way here. This is the one I really love. It creates those squiggly areas where they crisscross back and forth each other. And then this one, I also did a multi-gradient on it so that I got that blending of colors. So if you've been kind of holding back, kind of hesitating, afraid to try things, the only thing you're ever going to do is what you do right now. Try something new, have some fun with it. Do we have any other quick questions, Amy? I'm a little bit over time.
I don't see any other questions. No.
Okay. So hopefully we hit our goal today of showing you what all those tools in Point Create do. I do want to mention in the July workshop, Phil Carlton is going to show how to do, I'm going to cancel this out. He's going to show how to do Bezier mode. So you don't want to miss that one. You want to make sure you get signed up for it. And I want to thank you for attending today. Had a great time with you guys. Come back and join us again.